And that idea of walking your own path in the world, while in concept, you can intellectually get it, in practice can be incredibly challenging, because what you're doing is you're making decisions, and the discernment comes from listening to yourself, listening to situations, listening to relationships, knowing what your principles and values are. But more often than not, it's stepping over expectations that have been set up, not just by yourself, but by your family culture, by the culture around you.
Welcome to Beyond Listening, a podcast where we go deeper than the words to the heart of transformation, connection, and what it truly means to live and lead with purpose. I'm Adam Rumack, and Miriam Jones and I are the founders of Open Circle, where we create transformational experiences for individuals and organizations seeking to make the real change that they want. At Open Circle, we believe that listening isn't just about hearing, it's about presence, courage, and at the end of the day, the willingness to be changed by what we hear. In this podcast, we're going to bring that same philosophy to life through deep conversations with leaders, guides, and change makers. These are people that don't just talk about change, but embody it in the way they live, lead, and serve. Each episode is going to be an invitation to step beyond surface level conversations and into the kind of listening that moves us toward action, impact, and transformation. Whether you're here as a leader or someone who's seeking change in your life, this is going to be a space for you to listen and engage. Together, we're going to go beyond listening to connection, purpose, and the kind of change that matters. Thank you for being here. Please leave us a review if you like what you hear. Find us on the web at www.weareopencircle.com and reach out and let us know what you think. Enjoy the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, our first one of the year, 2025. And Miriam and I have been deep in the details of planning out our 2025 adventures, our open enrollment programs out in the field. We've got a couple trainings coming up, but today we're going to talk about something new for us, which is gender-focused retreats.
New and old, I'll say. New and
Yeah.
old.
But yeah, I mean, and that's part of where it comes from, is that we, have started to recognize the power of men being with men on these programs and women being with women on these programs. And generally I don't think we've ever separated those things out. Miriam, you've done a little bit of that work. And the veteran programs that we've done have been largely male, and some of our programs have just, they just flip-flop back and forth between the makeup of the group. But yeah, this is the first time that we've decided we're going to just put it on the schedule as a men's retreat, women's retreat.
We have left, like Open Circle, our retreats open, so that there is a diversity of people and stories. And early in Open Circle, I ran a number of women's retreats. And when I first was doing women's retreats, it was coinciding with the Me Too movement. It wasn't about that, but it was alongside that. So that influenced the sort of conversations and tenor of those gatherings. Now it feels very different. Now, and this has come off the back for me of continuously talking with women in leadership. And by leadership, I mean women who are walking their path in the world. That could be with their family, that could be in a community, that could be in an organization, but women who have consciously said, yeah, I want to lead in my life. And what I started to hear last year in many of my conversations and for myself was a struggle of how to do that, and it being a daily challenge and needing support, and a different sort of support that they were getting from males, actually, a sort of support that came from being with other women. And I think that was a lot of the inspiration for me of, once again, I did a bit of an experiment last year with a group of women, and this year really committing to supporting women in leadership.
Yeah, I think on my side, when we started Open Circle, and certainly in my life prior to Open Circle, the types of things that we did just generally attracted more women. I mean, there were more often than not, I would be the only man in the training or the program. And that has shifted drastically in the last couple of years. And I think, I always wonder, how much of that has to do with how we are characterizing our programs, internal shifts that I've personally made, and just getting to know myself better and becoming a dad, and, taking on some of those roles that are more, I don't know, they're just more, I guess, masculine. I guess being a dad's a pretty masculine thing to do, however you do it. But that shifted drastically to the point where we're working with, a lot of our programs are more majority male. And I think what it gave me a little bit of more confidence to do is say, hey, we can try this out, just a men's program, and designed in a way that is comfortable for guys that wouldn't do this kind of thing if it wasn't. That's kind of important for me, is being able to reach out to guys that we have different problems than women. It's oftentimes that we're either expecting ourselves or expected to have some kind of leadership role. And the examples for how to do that are generally pretty bad. I mean, Miriam and I, we were just talking about this board of commissioners meeting here in Curry County, and I'm sure these guys, their hearts are in the right place. It's all men up there, but the way that they are trying to lead the community, it's like, I don't know if they have a better example. I'll just put it that way. Doing things in a way which may have some more feminine, and I'm putting that in air quotes, influence, like building collaborative support, like reaching out to the community of experts and not trying to be an expert, but facilitating the conversations with strength and dignity and openness and care, to be able to move things forward, rather than just coming with the great idea, the mansplaining, and expecting that everyone's going to fall in line. And when they don't, it's complaining, or it's, the word orderly was used. Like, we need to stay orderly. Well, who's responsible for the order? That's the sort of masculine side. It's actually our responsibility, not men, but people in leadership, to create the scenario and the situations where it's not orderly or disorderly. It's people want to contribute in a positive way rather than rebel against the poor leadership. So it's those kinds of examples that I think in the men's program, I'm going to intentionally fill it with people that are exploring that side of themselves, that kind of leadership where they can be caring, compassionate, strong, in our hearts and in our bodies, because you're going to have to be for my program, and are wanting to be around other guys that are also feel like it's okay to be more sensitive, but not at the expense of taking our responsibility in the world and in our lives, which I think, is the polarization of masculinity and femininity, is it's all one way or another. Like, it's either toxic or it's positive. And I think in general, it's this middle where, the qualities which are considered toxic are only in the absence of the ones that are also positive. And together they add up to making a positive impact in the lives around us.
It was interesting when we were, as we've been designing these and moving towards them. Adam and I tend to listen and read a diversity of material. And Adam sent me a podcast, and it was a men's podcast. And as I was listening to it, I texted him and went, "Wow, it feels to me like I can hear the powerlessness in that situation that man and those men are facing." And it was really clear to me that men and women feel powerlessness in different ways and for different reasons, and that the challenge in that when it comes to leadership is to buy into that powerlessness. For women, what I notice in myself and in other women is often the areas where we feel like we cannot act, where it's someone else's fault, where we're stuck in the form of a relationship, or we're stuck in a patriarchal system is a term that's often used, are actually the places where we're most called to act, and to act in a particular way that comes from our own innate sense of, as Adam said, responsibility. The reason for the retreat and to get people away from their daily lives is that we live necessarily habitually in our daily lives. And I don't just mean that like habitually we get up and we do some, in my case, do a form of exercise, then breakfast, then sit down for work, and then, timetable wise, I mean, we live habitually in the way we relate to others in the world. And we can feel stuck and powerless in those relations we have with others in the world. And what I've found is when we get in the retreats and we do some, I would call it unwinding, we can really start to see what needs we're ignoring in ourselves. And also we can start to see how we're not actually powerless, that we're not actually communicating what we need, and we're not enacting on our sense of inspiration, intuition, and don't feel able more often than not to enact our lives outside of expectations and judgments that we've set upon ourselves and often that we've learned from childhood.
So Miriam, that podcast was the one about the impact of abortion on the male partner in the, yeah. What specific to that stood out for you?
I mean, what I heard in that podcast was that men in that case felt that they didn't have a choice, that when push came to shove, they didn't have a choice in the situation, and that they were put into, and it wasn't right for them to have a choice or to be part of that choice. And
that's the political side of things.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, somewhat. But I think this kind of comes down to gender as well. It's somewhat political and ideological, but it's also the nature of women. Babies grow in women's bodies. So yeah, when we talk about abortion, but then when we also talk about, women having babies and breastfeeding, men feel like can feel powerlessness because they don't feel like they have a choice. It's the women's body. It's a different form of relationship. So it's examples in gender where our differences cause conflict or a sense of powerlessness, instead of our differences being able to work together for the greater good, in this case of the family, of choices, of and on a larger sense in society and culture. And that's what I mean about being habitual in relationships.
Sage is in here, which is kind of cool. And he's playing with the whale that my dad gave me.
No.
That my dad carved when I was a little kid. Sage, I'm going to need you to go outside though for a few minutes, okay? I mean, why I asked about specifically about that question about the podcast was because I actually think that the whole pro-choice, pro-life conversation is one that it's like emblematic of, in some ways, our separation from nature, right? And so there's that controversial book, the Hunters and Gatherers Guide to the 21st Century, which super political, controversial. Can't say I would agree with everything in there, but it makes you think about both when there was not an option for abortion, which I'm, no one's advocating for here, but and also we had an ethical underpinning, shared ethical underpinning that would have taught us that life is sacred even before it's born. It would confine us into, I think, as men and women, to roles, like the sacredness of the woman's role to be able to give life, and the male's role to protect in that vulnerable time in particular, you know? And I feel like with men, and I'm bringing that up because we don't live in that world anymore where we all share an similar understanding that like creation is sacred. However whoever the creator is, I don't think that there's even a sacredness for most of us in our daily life, or many of us. And where there's this seems like a fighting with those roles, which I think for both men and women leads to a sort of sense of purposelessness. But I don't know about women. So I think that's very common for men, in terms of finding our sense, like we have to continually, without the intrinsic biological sort of mandate to be able to at least bear life or create life, we have to find purpose, right? Like we don't men, I don't think intrinsically have a purpose, without claiming it, which I think is the sort of leaning towards the toxic, or being supported in finding it, which I think is where the positive side of things is. So the younger generation, and you can see with social media and the millions of myriad influences that young men have in their life, that there's not that it feels like a rare gift to be given some sense of purpose by mentors, by other men in particular. And to be able to I think for me to be able to continually sort of re-find it and be reminded of it, and not try to fit myself into a box that society has created for what a man is supposed to be, or what a person is supposed to be, or what I should be doing, which this, like the schooling system and all of that sort of is, here's your boxes, find the one that you fit in. So I think that these opportunities to be around the kind of groups that we're going to pull together, where people are, so speaking towards the men's retreat, I know Jeremy, who will be co-facilitating with it with me, some of the guys that I'm going to be really strongly encouraging to come, are all people that are not, their job role or their role in life might look conventional, not always, but it might look conventional, but their hearts are not conventional, in the sense of understanding that the purpose that they're fulfilling in their life is bigger than themselves, and therefore demands that they're contributing more than the job title, or the career even that they're in. It requires them to live from their heart and let that guide them.
Yeah, I think the women's work and men's work is same, like the end result that we're heading towards the same in principle. But I think the reason that we're doing it separately is the way that we get there is very different. The things that we need, the things that really are conducive and supportive to getting there can be really different. And
I'm curious, Miriam, one question that came up for me when you were sharing earlier. It sounded like, and this might just be my own like projection and assumption, that a lot of the women's work is, even when men aren't there, is in relationship to their relationship to men. Like just the idea of patriarchy is like,
not
go ahead.
Not necessarily. I think that or while there are women of many cultures who come to this work, generally the women that I've worked with come from Western traditions. And in those Western cultures, it is not necessarily in relationship to men that the challenges come out, I would say the deepest conflict is in relationship to self. And it's often projected onto men or onto structures. Well, what I see is that women do, because of these relationships to self, they do not feel empowered to change them. And that idea of walking your own path in the world, while in concept, you can intellectually get it, in practice can be incredibly challenging, because what you're doing is you're making decisions, and the discernment comes from listening to yourself, listening to situations, listening to relationships, knowing what your principles and values are. But more often than not, it's stepping over expectations that have been set up, not just by yourself, but by your family culture, by the culture around you. And so to change, to meet structures or of your relationship with people or in wider society, and to not women often talk about how things need to change, and it's women's job to do that, but to actually do that in a way that's in alignment with often the nature of women is the best way to say it. What they feel like is their intrinsic nature can be incredibly challenging. And as you said, there are not a lot of examples of it. So there's not like there's a clear path of a way to do it. So, in my own experience, it results for me, in a lot of, you have to be incredibly courageous, because you're not going to get necessarily a lot of validation. And a lot of the things that are seen as, for women, respond to situations to keep themselves safe, necessarily so. And so it's very difficult to be courageous and work out when that could put yourself, or in many women's cases, your children, in danger, and if that's worth it or not. And the discernment, for example, when to speak up, when to not speak up. And that's where the manipulation comes from. The manipulation comes from it has been in our culture very, very dangerous at times to speak up, and very, very dangerous to walk your own path. And, we have many examples in history of women even being killed for that. And so, you do not want to, as it's your job to keep yourself safe and your children safe and your families, whether it be chosen families or relatives safe. That protective mama bear, whether you have kids or not, is certainly there. But also equally alongside it, particularly I found at the moment, of course, I haven't lived back in history. So, for the moment, what I'm hearing is women are feeling like it's really important, and they take a role in society to work with the systems that we have and the way that society is going. And that challenge of actually being discerning and knowing how to make choices is a daily one. It comes up in many, many different ways, and particularly finding your own way to do it and being brave and doing it in your own way, even though past science, research, structures don't necessarily say that that's the way to do it. It's often you're going against the way you're meant to do it, and sort of being brave in that.
So what does it look like? What does the women's retreat look like?
Well, I want to hear what the men's retreat looks like.
Pretty simple. I mean, I don't think, for me, it's not about, and this, as you're talking, I'm thinking both about like assumptions that are built into the gender, the way that you and I are understanding gender, and the people that we tend to surround ourselves with, and that those assumptions can be quite different, like just in terms of there are models. There are very old models for male and female relationships, and roles, kind of what I was talking about before. And those, we're sort of untethered as a mainstream culture from those things. And there's a lot of resistance to those things. And I'm not sure that they were all bad. And I'm not sure that I'm quite sure they weren't all good. But we tend to be around, progressive, like you said, Western, progressive Western 21st century ideas about men and women and our roles and what we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to be relating to it. Actually, how we're not supposed to be relating to it is generally like how it comes across. It's like, well, not like that, not like not that, not like that. So what is it? That's what we find. That's what we are sort of burdened with finding for ourselves. And that's the freedom burden, right? So I think for the way that, that it looks for the men's backcountry trip, which we're calling Solitude, and I'm calling it that because I knew the trail that I wanted to walk. I did it last year as part of our fundraiser for Strength to Serve. And it was just great trail. I saw 2 hikers in the 40 miles. A lot of people boating it. Probably won't be as many in April, but it felt like the place to do a men's program. It's kind of wild. It's kind of raw. There's flowing water the whole way and, full of wildlife. So it's going to be 40 miles and a 40-mile trail. I think we've got 5 days on the permit with the Forest Service to do that. And this trail is also logistically, both of the big backcountry programs we're doing this year with Open Circle are logistically challenging. So we're providing the value of handling a lot of that logistical challenge. This requires a car shuttle. So a local company is going to do our shuttle, and we'll start in the inland part of the trail where it should be nice and warm and sunny, and we'll end up very close to the coast here in Oregon. And we'll be following the Rogue River Trail the whole way. And the Rogue River Trail was made famous. Rogue River was made globally famous by the author Zane Grey, who has a book called The Rogue River Feud, and it was based on Solitude Bar. So that's the place in that area where we're going to do our 24-hour fast. So that's where the name comes from, Solitude. And I think that that's something for men, having an opportunity to feel like I can take that time to be both alone and supported feels really important. So we'll do our 24-hour solo there. The walks are going to be pretty big. We'll do about 10 miles a day. And although you would think it's all downhill because you're going from the top high point of a river to a lower point in the river, there's a lot of going up and down the cliff, along the cliffs, real exposed, but the views are amazing. And then we're in old growth forests and craggy parts of the river that the boaters can't get to. And we'll do circles every night, so opportunities to share and just be, honest and sharing our stories with no, in our listening circle form, there's never any pressure or agenda to be vulnerable. It's just kind of what happens when guys are doing stuff together. So in my experience, the strongest bonds I've made with other guys are when we're doing stuff together. And the best conversations are kind of along the way. So whether that's, in the backcountry or, basically in the backcountry or on long car rides to the backcountry is where those conversations and the real stuff happens. Like I said, Jeremy's got a lot to offer in terms of his experiences, going from Peace Corps in the Forest Service to combat in Afghanistan, and his experience of sort of, he can correct me if I'm wrong in some way, but if I'm characterizing this wrong, but going from being the tough guy that, the toughest of the tough to losing that and having to find that, another form of toughness in himself, which he expresses now through his nonprofit leadership and his work with young people. So he's got a lot of wisdom to share around that. And we'll obviously be bringing in the context of the nature-based models that we use of change. And I'm sure a lot of other stuff will happen too. And the rest is kind of up to God and to the group to figure out what the rest of the trip is supposed to mean. We're going to provide the food. So again, all the logistical stuff, guiding on the trail. If we can, we'll do a big day hike. We may not have the time for that. And I think for this trip, it won't apply for yours, Miriam, because just different nature of the trip, but, or won't be as useful, but all of our backcountry trips get is it still 6 weeks, or I know it's 3 months of free access to Mountain Tough, which will hopefully everyone who comes on the trip will use that program so that we can have more time to explore and not just get from place to place. But it's also a really cool community that I think has many shared values to what we're going to be doing on the trail. And when these guys get back from the trail, they can also, maybe they'll be even more inspired to get their fitness up to be able to do more of this kind of stuff. So
when you share the details, I realize how different the women's retreat is.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point, right?
Yeah, because almost. I mean, we share the river. We're also by a river, and
but it's a California river. So in anywhere north of like Mendocino County, California, like the Feather River would be called a creek, and in Oregon it's called
Oregon.
a creek.
I know. I mean, Adam and I have done a lot of programs at where we're going on the Feather River, Los Sierras. It's beautiful. It's got great camping spots by the river, but we will have a house, and we will have a kitchen, and we will have toilets and showers. And, again, really different. We're going to be sharing meals. So a lot of the emphasis of this is, the morning practice will be a shared practice. The women who come will share what they do for their own practices in their lives. We'll be sharing meals. So different women will be cooking meals, and we will go on a beautiful hike, and that will be challenging. So there is a whole day hike, which will be challenging. And we will also, one of the beauties of this property is that every time we go there, we cross the river. And when you cross the river, there's more wild, untamed country. And we'll be going across there for some alone time. But we will have a lot more creature comforts and our fireside chats will mostly be indoors by the fire, but also we will take some walks at night because this property is beautiful at night. The emphasis of the women's retreat, a lot of the emphasis is sharing our wisdom with each other. And so both our stories and our wisdom, and the wisdom doesn't just come through our stories, and also comes through sharing, for example, of how you stay on track with your purpose, with the purpose-filled life amidst great challenges and daily tensions. Women who come, the relief mostly comes by committing to the 4 days that it is. And it's often very difficult for many women to commit to that. And so once they've committed to it, they're like, it's done. Kind of, while Adam's is called solitude, I would say ours is about gathering women together and allowing the time and space to do that, and accessing our greater wisdom and sharing it.
We could be doing the same things on it. And I think this is kind of the point. You could be doing the backcountry trip and it would be a very different experience with even we do all the same itinerary, but the experience of the solo time, the 24 hours, which is also a fast, by the way, would be completely different, a different experience. And we can call that experience an experience of solitude, or we can call it an experience of community. And in both cases, that both would be true. But it is sort of something about, it is in the deciding that it will be a group of men that sort of, or women, it sort of slants things in a direction about how we talk about it. And the trip itself, we talk about like the group field, which creates the magic, And I think for men, for me in particular, I'm like, would I sign up for this? Like I did it myself last year, it was a little bit of a logistical challenge, but I know that there is a tremendous magic in the gifts that we get from each other. And when we shift the center of gravity in a certain direction demographically, we know that there's going to be a certain flavor to that. And that flavor, it's not the only one, but it's one that can be really useful at different times in our lives and feels really important for me now to be offering it. And I know for you too, Miriam, and with the women's program for guys that just, they may not even know that they're missing that sense of like authentic community. And then the offerings that are out there are really, they're just really cheesy and corny. And like, I would never want to do them, so I'm sure that there's at least 5 other guys out there that are looking for something that has meaning and depth, but they don't want to be doing fake wrestling with other guys in mud and wearing headdresses and all this other weird stuff that, it's just really basic, but doing this with other guys. And then they want to come to Oregon and they want to see a trail that has a huge history and, biological and geological diversity and, want to make it easy on themselves to land in a program like this with like at least one cool leader, which would be Jeremy. So
I think you're what you said about men's programs is the same experience I have with women's programs and it actually created a lot of resistance to me doing this. But I realized in talking to people, there was a real need for something that was authentic, grounded. Also, as both Adam and I, as guides, coming into it in a way that is not telling people how they should be a man or a woman, what they should do, which is counterproductive to actually people finding their own way. Which is
it's easier though for the short term.
But it's counterproductive.
Like if someone just tells you how to be a woman or how to be a guy.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there wouldn't be the toxic, weird, gross stuff out there telling you how to be yourself.
And I think what we offer is not an ideology around that, but definitely an approach, which is a nature-based approach. And Adam mentioned coming back to your nature. And, when we think about nature and why we take people into nature, into the wilderness, is because the unwinding that I was talking about before, like the unwinding of the habits, inevitably in every single one of our programs, I would say every single person, which that sounds like a big claim, but it is true. I've thought about it. Every single person comes back to, and I deliberately say comes back to, an ability to kind of feel their own nature. And that's the leader. If you're talking about a leader, a male leader or a female leader or any form of leadership in your life, it's your capacity to not listen with your ear, but be able to feel that sense of your nature and let it lead you. And so that time out is really what you walk away with, plus some tools that enable you to not just remember what that feels like, but some tools to continue that in your life. So the shared practices in the women's is some tools to be able to make space for that, so to continue to come back, to be able to listen to that when you go back into the busyness and all of the noise of your life. I am now dropping all my resistances and opening the space to any women who are walking their path in the world and wanting that sense of leadership. Again, if it comes to your family or community or in the workplace, I know because I've experienced this can be a really valuable way to come back to that and be encouraged in it. And that support of those women, what I've seen happen is they continue to talk on text or WhatsApp, and we continue to gather online. So it's not just that weekend, but the relationships that with diverse women that you wouldn't normally meet, those relationships continue to be a support as you walk forward in your life.
The one thing I also want to add in here is, I think the price, you're still working on the pricing for the women's, Miriam.
Yeah, I mean, the pricing that we're using for this is we're sharing the cost of the accommodation. People bring their own food, so there's not a lot of layering in terms of logistics like there is in the backcountry program that Adam's doing, and kind of a baseline for the facilitation. So the pricing is going to be, very reasonable, and in terms of shared food, shared cost. So that's how I'm approaching it.
Yeah. And so for ours, because we've worked on the budget quite a bit and try to figure out how to make it accessible. There's a lot of logistics in it, and a lot of we want to make it easy for guys that don't have a lot of gear. They don't, want to be figuring out how to get all the food that they need during the week, maybe newer backpackers or guys that want to just make it easy on themselves. But we are offering scholarships. So for people that have a financial need, and particularly for people that, they have a financial need and are also, have demonstrated that they are living a life of service. So that can be veterans, first responders, school teachers, social workers, people that are, we know the jobs, we know how little those key jobs get paid compared to some that are out there that don't seem to be contributing anything to society, or even worse than that. And so we want to support. And so there are scholarship funds available, and we don't have to talk about financial need, but if you just come and, you reach out and you say you want to be there, and, this is the kind of life that you've led, you'll get a scholarship to be there. So that's built into what we do. And then the guys that do have more resources, then, you're also helping to contribute to the others that wouldn't be able to do something like this without you being on the trip. So
just to give you an example from the last program I did, we had one woman who was on a scholarship who was in social work, right through to a woman who was a judge, an entrepreneur. So a huge diversity of people. And I think that's part of the benefit. And also huge diversity in age. So we had, I think the youngest was in her late 20s, and actually in this one, the oldest was in her around 60. So, a huge diversity in age and a huge diversity in means. And that's part of that's part of the shared as well. That's it. Men and women out in the world.
We've sorted out
the gender problems.
All the way back to Genesis and the origin of the split between men and women. We're gonna heal it out there in the
we're gonna put it off. We're gonna create a space so people can solve it for themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See you out there.
See you out there.